In this video we're going to talk about how to choose a knife for you to carry. You got to think of how you're going to carry it. Are you going to carry it for self-defense? Are you going to carry it as a tool? Every knife could be used for both. And in some states, if you're carrying it for self-defense, you must have a permit in order to do so. The first thing we think about when choosing a knife, we often think about the looks, how it looks. Does it look cool? Now it is important to have it look good for you, but looks are really just a gimmick. You see in a lot of places, this is an amazing tactical flashbang knife, it's amazing, but really it's just to increase the price. Now it is important to find a quality blade, and we're going to talk about some of those aspects. But looks, it's just important that it looks good to you, that you enjoy the knife, that you like it. Alright, let's talk about blades. For me, the blade is the first thing I'm going to look at. Am I going to look at a blade like this is a simple folding knife? It's pretty small, and they come in different sizes. But for me, I really like to have a lock blade knife. So that would be a no for me. Here's a very basic lock blade, lock back knife. This one doesn't have a very sharp point, it's been rounded slightly. The blade is very thin, so it'd be good to cut very fine work, but as far as the ability to handle a strike or being used in a self-defense situation, or even used as a tool other than just cutting things, not very practical to me. This seems like too fragile of a knife. It has a little bit of wobble between the blade and the handle, way too much for me and my personal likes. So this would be a no. This knife doesn't have the wobble. It has a liner lock. It does have a belt clip. For me, a belt clip is very important because of where I want to carry my knife. I like to carry it just in the pocket, as I've shown in some other videos. This knife, it was a great knife. I liked it. The blade's a little thinner than I like, and it did experience some bending as I used it as a tool and in some other practicing and whatnot. Decent knife. It's a cheaper knife. It's pretty lightweight. Has a good feel to it. This is a knife that I have carried for a while. But currently I've decided to move to something else, and that happens sometimes. You may buy a knife and choose the next day that it didn't quite fit your need. Make sure you keep track, make note of what you didn't like so that you can look for that or look to avoid that in the future. This knife, I like this knife. It's a very heavy, sturdy knife. The blade, I like the shape of the blade. It's a little thicker than the other knife, a little more durable. This is a knife that I have enjoyed. Has a good belt clip. When I originally got this knife, it actually had some sides to it. I didn't like those. Found out how to remove them. I removed them, and it's become a better knife since. So this is a knife that I have carried, and it's a thumb knife, meaning I open it with my thumb. Not a bad knife. It doesn't have the wobble, just like I look for, and has a good belt clip. Looks nice. Feels good in my hands. Not a name brand, but that's okay. As long as the quality's there, that's what's important. You also have to consider, are you going to carry a sheath knife? These are more difficult to hide or conceal, but in some states you cannot conceal without a permit. Make sure you're aware of that before you decide what you're going to do. The next thing to think about is a regular thumb type opening knife versus an assisted opening knife. This is an assisted opening knife, meaning there's a spring inside that as it gets to a certain point, the spring will open it the rest of the way. It's helpful in one-headed opening. But you have to think about this. How is this going to look to a police officer if they discover you carrying this, especially if you don't have a permit, don't have any training? Is this really a tool? You've got to consider that. Another knife to look at is a little larger knife. This is the knife that I actually like. It feels good in my hands. I love the weight. It's a full auto knife, meaning I just use a single button to open the knife. which is not legal in some states. Make sure you know your local laws. It locks open. I love the feel. It's got a good belt clip. It also has a lanyard ring with a small spike here to break glass if needed. This is a knife that I really like. Now, another thing to consider as we look at these two knives here, for example, this knife has a serrated edge along with a tanto tip. This knife is an all straight edge with a nice curve to it. When you're looking at a knife and trying to decide what knife you want to purchase, think about these things. Serrated edges are nice in that they retain their sharpness a little bit longer because they have that jaggedness to it. However, they're more difficult to sharpen and to care for if it becomes dull. Next thing to consider when choosing a knife is how you're going to hold a knife. Is it just going to be in your pocket, and so all you're after is a good belt clip, so it'll slide in your pocket real easy and just clip in there? Or are you after a less conventional way of carrying it? Perhaps in a ankle holster or around your neck on a chain. It's important to know where you want to carry that knife if you plan to carry it on you. It's pretty common to have attach it to a belt. These clips can also clip onto a belt. And if you choose to do that, make sure you know how to get it to the ready position as quickly as possible for self-defense situations. You could also get creative in how you want to carry your knife. There's many different ways, and I'm sure you could come up with one of your own. But make sure you know where you want to carry it before you choose the knife that you're going to carry. That way you can pick a knife that fits that position or fits that place that you wish to carry it at. Another option, and this one, is perhaps you want to buy multiple knives and leave them in strategic locations throughout your home, your office, your car. As you do that, perhaps you get a little piece of Velcro and strap it to something, or you keep it in your drawer at work. Maybe you have multiple. Now if you do this is a pretty common thing. A lot of people have multiple knives. They put them in different places. In the kitchen, for example, we usually have a drawer with knives in it. Remember that if you do that, there is the danger that an attacker could use that same knife against you. Perhaps they break in or they find it and they may use it against you. So that's something also to be aware of when choosing a knife and where to put knives. Also children, very big concern there. You got to make sure that they know how to use a knife and how dangerous they are. If they see one similar to a firearm, they must come tell you and then take you to where it's at. Don't have them bring it to you. It's better to train them in the knives so they don't have that fear of the knife and that curiosity, and always have them do it when you're around. When choosing a knife, it's also important to make sure you know how to get it to the ready position as quickly as possible. Now every one of these knives here can be into the ready position. Even this one that I said I didn't like, pull it out of my pocket, get it to the ready position quickly. Make sure that it is quickly for you. You enjoy the way that it works. It feels comfortable. It feels quickly, and you're comfortable with using it. It's important that ready position as quickly as possible. Otherwise, that knife will just be sitting in your pocket or in its carrying position, unused in a situation that you need it. So think about that, getting it to the ready position as quickly as possible, and then train it, like we showed in some previous videos. Train it over and over again so that you know how to get it to that ready position quickly. Knives are tools. Anybody that says otherwise is lying to you. They're used with a purpose. They're used to cut, for example. This knife is used to cut. I've used it to cut different things, meat, food. I've used it to cut boxes and paper. And as any tool, it needs to be respected and taken care of. Just like any good tool or weapon, it's important to take care of your knife. We're going to take this knife for example, and what happens with knives, especially ones you carry in your pocket, you tend to get a lot of lint in between the hand guards and in where the blade folds into. And you want to make sure that you can always get this knife to the ready. You can trust this knife. So it's important to get it clean in there and around the joints so that it is always reliable. You want it to maintain its reliability. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to just get a simple toothbrush and just brush off the knife. Now everybody could have their own different way of taking care of a knife. This is just one way that I do to take care of my knives. Some knives tell you not to take them apart, especially assisted and full auto knives. Unless you really know what you're doing, I don't recommend disassembling your knife. Take it to someone who knows, help them, have them clean it up for you. And that's what I do. When it gets to a point where the knife needs some extra care in the sharpening, I'll take it to a cutlery location where they can really sharpen it, clean it up really nice for me. So the first thing we're going to do is take the toothbrush and just kind of brush out whatever we can reach. Any lint, dirt, grime, any of the mechanism. Brush it off. Be very careful. You can wipe off the blade, the cloth, wipe the knife off. To get down inside in the groove, we're going to utilize Q-tip. Just get in there, get around the joints, around the edge of the end of the blade there. Back at the back. Clean it all. See, it's pretty dirty in there. Same in here. Also, close the knife and do the same thing on the outside right here so you can get what isn't shown when the knife is open. Okay? Now if the knife has some gunk on it or whatever, I recommend using rubbing alcohol. Get a little Q-tip, get some rubbing alcohol, and just scrub on that blade to get it clean. The nice thing about the rubbing alcohol, it also sanitizes it. It does a decent job of getting the grime off. Okay, do both sides. Go ahead and wipe it off with the washcloth. When it dries up real quick, it allows you to move on to the next step. Okay, I'm fairly satisfied with the way that came out, so we're going to move on to the next step. Next we're going to kind of clean up the blade a little bit as far as the edge. Now this is a serrated edge. I don't currently have the tools to sharpen the serrated edge. Again, when that gets to the point where it needs sharpening, I take it to a cutlery shop where they can clean it up and sharpen it up nicely for me. And it's usually not very expensive. So first we're going to clean up this blade up here. We're going to use just a sharpener. It has two stones in here. It angles. As the blade pulls across it, it helps sharpen it. This doesn't get it an amazing edge, but it'll clean up some marks. If you got a ding in there, it'll help a little bit. Major dings, I would take it to someone else to get it fixed. Just put some mild pressure on there. Do it both ways. Okay. Wipe that off. Now here I have a stone. This is a wet stone. So I'm going to get a little wet and get some water on it to utilize it. And then I will put the blade at a very specific angle, the angle that I want. And I will run that blade as if I'm cutting off of the blade, or cutting off pieces of the stone. Even though I'm not cutting the stone, I'm at that angle that I would use to cut. Okay, we just got the stone a little bit wet. We're going to place this in our cloth. We're going to get that angle that we want, and we're going to make a motion that cuts along the stone, and I want to do the full length of that portion of the blade. Because this has a small curve to it, mine isn't completely straight, I can't just go straight down. I've got to do a small curve along that entire length of the blade. I want to do it evenly, otherwise it'll have a small deformity if I sharpen it just straight every time. So I start and I slide across, and I want to get the full, as if I'm cutting that stone. Okay? Now this is a very fine sharpening stone, so I'm not getting a lot off of here. I'm just grinding it down slightly. Okay, I'm going to go the other direction, same thing. Again, if my knives get too beat up, I take it to a professional to sharpen it for me. They do a much better job for me. Okay. Okay, now we're going to do the other piece of the blade there. Going back. Be careful not to put your thumb or fingers in the way of the blade as you're sharpening it. You're doing it very carefully so that if you are holding it here, you're not going to slide all the way up into your hand. You're going to do it slow and easy. Try and do the same number of strokes on each side of the blade to get an even sharpness. And there you have it. When you're finished, wipe the blade off. Excellent. That feels really good. Okay, the last part of maintenance on this knife, and I do this on a lot of my knives, I like to add a little gun oil up into the mechanism. This helps it get that smooth, fluid motion. Now, too much oil will tend to collect dirt, so you want to be really light on the oil. But I do like to add just a small amount of oil to most of my knives. Be careful though, make sure you read about your knife and be aware of what oils could be used on it. Some knives are built in a way that oil would not be a good idea. So be aware of that. Again, I just use some gun oil. Like I said, you're just going to use a very small amount. So I'm going to first put it on a Q-tip. Very small amount of oil. And I'm just going to rub it in right where I want it to be. And then close it. Hit those parts that I missed. Good. Then use the dry side to help clean up some of that oil that's extra. You don't want that getting gunked up, like I said. Just clean it up a little bit. Test it out. Great. Looks good. And that's how you maintain that knife that you've picked. Okay, so we've covered how to pick a knife. Some of the things that you want to do. The number one thing to do with picking a knife is how it feels. If you notice, I say that over and over again. This knife feels good to me. It may not be the perfect knife, but for me, this knife feels good, so this is a knife that I'm going to use. This is a knife that I enjoy carrying with me, and I'm going to use it. Durability is very important. Make sure that the blade is nice and strong, good thickness. Sharpness can be achieved either by yourself or through a professional. And go out there and pick yourself a good knife and make sure you take care of it.